All right, what's going on, folks? It's Cool Water again with the second installment of Who Killed the Black Entrepreneur. And starting a little bit past 8 o'clock, I want to give folks a chance to try to chime in for those that may have not joined me last week. So I will be probably doing about 3 series and kind of go back and evaluate. Then I'll come back and do, maybe a few more after I kind of see, what I'm sounding like and if the information is relative to, the people on the receiving end. So that's what I'm going to do. But for those folks that did and will be joining me, just to recap, last week I discussed 16th century slavery as it relates to Wall Street and the global economy. I delved into sharecropping in the debtors system. I also talked about Emancipation Proclamation and the newly freed slaves. I didn't really touch on the 40 acres and the mule, but that goes hand in hand. Black folks are supposed to get their 40 acres and a mule once President Lincoln gave them the emancipation. And that came as a result of, I think it might have been General Howard, whatever the university, the guy's name is, they named Howard University after him, the white guy. He was the one that said they need at least 40 acres and a mule to be able to maintain the society. So I delved into some of that, talked about Jim Crow, laws are set up to keep folks enslaved and neutralize them economically. I went in briefly to the civil rights and talked about integration and how that was diluted, the economic strength of placing black folks into the culture system of economics, and I touched the some of the riots, you could say the race riots. I also had a huge disconnect with us economically rising. So, again, that was the recap for last week. What I typically try to do is give folks some information that they can go, and kind of grab hold on. Last week, I gave out a series of books and DVDs. I'll give you a couple of new ones this week, so you can check back on the first one. But last week, let's see, I think I said Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson, Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, Invisible Capital by Chris Rabb, Cash Machine by Laurel Langmeyer, and I think those were the 4 books. This week, I'm telling you to go look for Millionaire Fast Lane by M.J. DeMarco, Black Business Secrets by, what is this guy's last name, man? Let me see here. Dante Lee, that's it, Dante Lee. Black Business Secrets by Dante Lee. Investing in the Dream, which is a book by a black guy named Jesse Brown, and The Personal MBA, which is by Josh Kaufman. Those books will start to get you in line with the economics and okay, somehow or another, I think my phone just dropped, and hopefully I still got all that info. So I'm gonna quickly just say what I said and then come right back. because I don't even know if he recorded it. Somebody called me on another line, and then the call just dropped, I guess. So 16th century slavery, I delved into that, sharecropping, the debtor system, Emancipation Proclamation, Jim Crow, and civil rights. I was giving out a list of books. Millionaire Fast Lane, Investing in the Dream, which is by Jesse Brown, Black Business Secrets by Dante Lee, The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman, Black Business Secrets is by Dante Lee. DVDs that you may want to get a hold of. Some of y'all probably know about Hidden Colors. That's more on a historical tip, but check for that. 7 a.m., Black Friday, and Out of Darkness. Those are some DVDs that I would suggest you begin to delve into. So now, tonight, what I plan on doing, this is the objective and the goal. The goal tonight is to evaluate Jim Crow, the Prohibition years, and other ethnicities that were able to rise in economic power. Okay, let me say that again, because we're moving forward. I'm starting with the historical point from the 16th century, with the slaves on Wall Street, downtown Manhattan, Wall Street and Walter Street, and I'm marching forward so that I can bring you to where you are today, so you can look around and understand why you got these mega corporations, mega individuals that are, I guess you could say, descendants of, particular slave owners, slave masters, presidents, and all of that nature, so you can understand exactly, what's going on around you and how you can begin to engage in the entrepreneurial process as you move up the ladder. Because at some point, you're going to start dealing with the Irish, you're going to have to deal with the Jewish, you're going to have to deal with the Asian, you're going to run into the Poles, you're going to run into the Kurds, and all these folks, typically, unless you pay real close attention, they all look similarly the same. You see what I'm saying? And you're not going to understand the dynamics. And some of these folks going to want you to behave in a certain manner. And if you ain't got the history, you may behave and you may bow down and you may do what they do in the music industry, which is you selling your soul and you taking oaths and shit just so you can do what? Get to the money, which in my personal opinion, like AB said, you got to know your moral limit. Well, in this situation, you got to know your financial limit. How rich do you want to be? And if you're trying to be so rich where you're ready to turn yourself out, then you might need to reevaluate yourself and your moral principles. Okay, so the objectives that I'm going to delve into, what laws did Jim Crow and others put out to stop blacks? What was the Prohibition years, and what was Prohibition? Why did the Jews, the Irish, the Italians, the Poles surpass African Americans in economic power? Okay, that's the objectives on where I'm going tonight, and what I want to accomplish, with this particular lecture. I'll do 15, 20 minutes. If anybody got some dialogue, comments, they want to, jump in, say a couple of words, I'll open it up, boom, then I'll jump back in, do a little bit more, and then we'll close it out. I'm not going to try to stay on here too long. I'm not going to try to keep y'all too long, okay? But first and foremost, the number one thing I think that we have to revisit would be the Jim Crow. And going back before the Jim Crow, we have to take a look at the laws that came before that. Okay, so now you're talking about the slave codes. Slave codes was established in 1667. Now, I delved into the 16th century, but you got to understand the makeup of how from the 16th century, really the 15th century up until now, black folks ain't never really had an entrepreneurial leg up, okay? We made some strides with Black Wall Street, but even with that got disintegrated and bombed. They made sure there was no Negro finna rise and no Negro be economically sound upon his own ability unless he attached himself to the dominant culture. You understand what I'm saying? That is something that you need to understand. So slave code 1667 to around the 1800s. The black code came in after that. It was 1865 to 1866. Jim Crow came in after that, 1876 up until 1965 during the Civil Rights era. Okay, what were the black slave codes? I'm sorry, what were the slave codes? Slave codes, number one, it allowed for the slave master to retrieve a slave from the North without permission. So he'd go get his slave. Now, you remember the movie, Oliver Solomon Northrop, and I forgot the movie's name. He was a free black man living in the North. He got tricked by some white folk. They put him in a wagon in a cage. They took him down south, and he was down there working for years until he met Brad Pitt, who actually contacted the folks up north that he was, the white people that he knew up there he had great relationships, and they came and got him. Okay, but he was down there. He got hoodwinked and the whole nine because they tricked him back into slavery. And he only had quasi-freedom, which means that he only had partial freedom because he probably still had to endure some discrimination. But during the slave codes, they prohibited folks from voting, bearing arms. You couldn't have guns, gathering in groups for worship. You couldn't be in one place, too many people gathering for worship and having church and things of that nature. And learning to read and write. So, if you can't pray to your God, you can't read about your God, you can't write about your God, you can't write about other things, then naturally you are a dysfunctional group of people because you are not allowed to progress. Okay? And then after that came the black code. Black code, laws passed by the southern states in 1865 to 1866 after Civil War with the intent of restricting African American freedom and compelling them to work in a labor based on low wages or debt, okay? So they transcending. These folks is making sure Negroes ain't finna rise by no means necessary. Now, on the other side of the globe, we also have to keep into account that the kings and the queens of England and Europe played a major role in establishing their rights to passage over here in America. Because when they sent Christopher Colombo, a.k.a. Christopher Columbus, the so-called discovered the New World, which he never stepped foot on the North American continent. He fell off into Brazil and the lower islands. They were making sure that their stake in the United States or North American continents and the colonies and southern islands were going to be economically feasible for them. You see what I'm saying? Which allowed them to be able to reap the benefits because Europe was basically a defunct and dying economy at one point. They were damn near extinct. You know what I'm saying? If it wasn't for certain ethnicities and certain other established people really of color that went in and made Europe what it is, because they gave them the science, they gave them the cosmology, they gave them the etymology, they taught them astrology, they taught them the mathematics, and made them what it is. Way before, Henry the Navigator and the queens and the kings established their dominance in trying to go out and conquer the globe. Okay, so slave codes, black codes were put in place to ensure nobody gonna make no move. And then as we got Emancipation Proclamation, all of a sudden, boom, they said, well, we got to keep these folks in their place. We still got to keep them locks and box. And here comes Jim Crow. Okay. Now, last week I told you, for those folks that don't know what Jim Crow was, who he was, Jim Crow, stage name of a popular minstrel performer named Thomas Daddy Rice. Okay. He was a blackface. He danced in blackface. He acted black. He did blackface. So he was a white guy who put on blackface, pretended to be black to entertain white people during that era. Okay, but they took him, his quote unquote persona, and they married it to a group of laws using his name or using the name Jim Crow as a way to continue to forge ahead and continue their economic dominance. So Jim Crow was adopted to represent a system of American laws that were enacted after the Civil War for the purpose of controlling emancipated slaves. Okay? Let's see. Yeah. So with that being said, they continue to create new laws. I mean, you know, if you get laws that got, you know, you look at a person and you get lynched or go to jail, you know, that's going to make you stand down. It's going to make you stay in your place. It's going to make you behave, okay? Jim Crow was a vicious and widespread American system of reconstituted slavery laws whose aim was to keep blacks from accumulating property, starting businesses, engaging in trade and commerce, and establishing an economic base independent of white people, okay? So you couldn't start a business unless you got some white guy to give you the authority. You couldn't do anything without somebody white's approval. Now, this ain't to be disgraced, you know, this ain't to make white folk feel bad, you know, put y'all under the bus. It's just to let y'all know that this is how some of y'all got a leg up. 400 years of a leg up. And then you would say, and then some people say, well, black folks ain't, you know, black folks, you know, they lazy or they don't want to work. No, man, we were put into a box so that we would not be able to be self-sufficient for many, many years to come. And now we do it to ourselves. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, why don't y'all just go get a job? Okay, well, okay, but the job I want, they ain't paying. You know, or the skills I would like to obtain, they ain't allowing me to get close to that particular skill. So, you know, it's not like we just be out here complaining and crying. We complaining and crying because the forefathers that came before us, they had to endure this. You know, like I said before on the first podcast, my grandmother told me my grandfather went to work in Mr. Polson's farm for 50 cents a day. I mean, who working for 50 cents a day with a family? Nobody. You can't, you know, feed nobody off of that. You know what I'm saying? But he had to do it, and they stayed in a 2-room shack. So when you had that type of systematic, you know, behavior going on to make sure a whole group of people never get back on their feet financially, economically, socially, spiritually, I mean, you know, you can't do nothing but see the repercussions of it, and you can't do nothing but hear the pain and the gripes that come with it, okay? The Jim Crow laws were ambiguous. Blacks could not be employed in any job other than plantation labor without a license granted by a judge, and the employer had to be white. If a black worker left his job for any reason, including abuse or unpaid wages, he could be arrested and put on public works, projects, clearing forests, draining swamps, or building roads, railroads, and canals. Jim Crow laws put in effect across America legally re-enslaved the most productive people on earth while eliminating them as the economic competitors of whites. Okay? So again, you know, I know the topic that I got out, people are like, man, what is this about? It sounds crazy, but because my mind works like a spider, I see stuff in so many different directions. So I'm able to pull this stuff together. This is why I said, who killed the black entrepreneur? Because most black folk are not interested in being a self-sufficient, economically unsupported class of people outside of the dominant society. They, you know, in slavery you had jobs. Now we got jobs. They just, with corporations. And we go to them begging and pleading, can you feed us? Can you give me some? Can I get some medical benefits and all that? And we don't ever create for self, and we don't have no industry. So now here's the issue, because now the kids is in jeopardy because we don't have an educational system. You feel me? We don't have our own healthcare system. We got to keep going to somebody else. We don't have people out here planting and farming and doing crops and providing foods for people that look like us, because we eating processed food and we eating all kind of other foods, and it's giving us cancer, it's giving us diabetes. You feel me? So with that being said, this is, you know, one of the reasons why I felt that this particular topic was important, okay? A couple of more points on the Jim Crow, then I'm going to move on to the last leg of more or less like the civil rights and why that was a failure, and start to move toward some of the other areas that I just mentioned in the goals and objectives. Jim Crow also had the denial of bank loans and services, refusal of white wholesalers to supply back black businesses, violent denial of education for blacks, discriminating in real estate practice, police repression, denial of access to the political arena and the court system. So don't even think about going and complaining. If you go to the judge, he's going to look at you and tell you something crazy because he ain't on your side, right? These are some laws that I found or codes that I found today that fell under the Jim Crow. Marriage. Black and whites prohibited from being married if you was a barber and you wanted to be a barber. No barber person shall serve as a barber to white women or girls. This is under Georgia law, okay? Beer and wine. You cannot serve white and black folks in the same room. So if you had a liquor license and you was out here trying to do it, you had to make sure that these people had to be in two distinct places, mainly because they didn't want black folks congregating with white folks and mixing with white folks. Amateur baseball. If you play a black amateur baseball team, cannot play baseball in 2 blocks from a white playground. And white baseball amateur teams cannot play baseball in 2 blocks away from a black playground. You feel me? So all of this systematically is being put in place to ensure that nobody rises from the African American community economically in any form. And it's still ongoing today. You see what I'm saying? So now what I want to do is now I'm going to briefly go into the civil rights failures, and then I'll do 2 minutes to see if somebody got a question or want to comment, and then I'm going to jump back in, ride through these other little points and objectives, and then we will close it out and see if there's any other comments or concerns or anything of that nature. So now, civil rights movement failures. Okay, number 1, black leadership focuses weight of resources on achieving integration. They thought if they removed Jim Crow, blacks would gain equality. Okay. Number 2, black leaders failed to focus on neutralizing the forces behind Jim Crowism or developing effective strategies for black America from dealing with the problem that sprang from the maldistribution and racist control of power and resources in America. Number 3, they failed to develop a long-term national plan with goals and strategies spelling out where blacks ought to be going and how to get there. Number 4, black leaders failed to construct a national network of institutions to train new generations of blacks for black empowerment. I took this from the book Black Labor, White Wealth, Dr. Claude Anderson, because that fell right in line with the Jim Crow era, because as we started moving in the civil rights movement and we making them strides and we feeling like we getting ahead, we was at the bargaining table bargaining for equality. We wasn't bargaining for the money. Now, as Dr. King began to make his move away from trying to hold hands, so to speak, with white culture, his last few statements before he was assassinated was, I think I integrated my people into a burning house, right? If you Google one of them speeches, you'll hear him say that. And then he goes and talks about economics, because any great leader, any great person at some point in their growth and development starts to realize their mistakes. He realized he should have been shifting towards the economic equality, because that would have gave black folks in the 60s the power that they needed to shut down all the BS that was going on around them when they were standing there asking for civil rights. But that wasn't the issue that they were shooting for during that time. You see what I'm saying? And then black leadership, was so interested and eager to hold hands with folks, they didn't think about the long-term repercussions that came with us being able to be a self-sufficient group of people, you know what I'm saying, and not having to go beg for somebody else to feed us, to clothe us, to give us medical care, you know what I'm saying, and all the like. So I think these 4 points really, was a major issue in the civil rights movement. And then last week, I briefly mentioned to you all about the race riots. The race riots also played a huge problem in the economic demise, because during the 60s, we tearing up our own cities. You know, we tearing up, you know, a lot of black folks after that emancipation and Jim Crow, you know, they started going north. And most of the cities that was getting torn up was Detroit, Philly, the Watts, Baltimore, New Jersey. You know, these areas was getting hammered because we was upset about the inequalities, but we was doing damage to ourselves. And then what happens when you do damage to yourself and you ain't got the money to rebuild your own community? Now you living in the slums. Now you living in poverty. Now everybody around you is enduring the same issues. You see what I'm saying? That you see across the board or across the country. So that played a huge role. The riot played a huge role in us not being financially and economically whole, if that makes sense to you. What I'm going to do real quick, 2 minutes, you know what I'm saying, I'll open it up. If you want to comment, please feel free. You know, if you just got a statement or a question, feel free. Star 6 is to unmute your phone. Star 6 is to mute it back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin to try to move forward towards current situations. So now, for the person or people that just came on, my goal was to evaluate Jim Crow. Now we're going to talk about, and then, you know, we went through that, the black codes, slave codes, and Jim Crow. I briefly touched on the civil rights kind of prior to, you know, the Jim Crow and whatnot. I'm kind of rambling, but I touched on that. And then I'm going to move forward into the Prohibition years, okay? Because as I'm doing this, I'm learning at the same time that I'm teaching this information. And it's blowing my mind because I'm seeing how a lot of things happened after we began to try to move towards a certain, you know, equality and civil rights and voting rights and things of that nature. So if you want to make a comment, please star 6 your phone and, you know, you can make a comment or ask a question. Anybody got something they want to say? Going once, going twice. All right. I'm going to pick back up. So I'm going to go briefly into the Prohibition years, which kind of crossed a little bit between the Jim Crow years and the civil rights. It's kind of like in the middle, okay? The first question that we want to ask is, what was prohibition? And why did it occur? Now, prohibition was a nationwide constitutional ban on the sale, production, importation, and transportation of alcoholic beverages that remained in place from 1920 to 1933. Okay, Franklin Roosevelt was the president during that time. No, he came right in after that. I forgot who was the president during that time. He was the guy who wanted to make sure it ended. Okay, now that because they put that in place, it started to mess with the country's money, because a lot of people was into doing, you know, drinking liquor and you know, living a life, doing what they wanted to do in regards to, you know, alcohol and the sale of it and transportation of it and things of that nature. But because a lot of the country was, you know, kind of more on a biblical thing, and you had the southern states that were the Bible belts and things of that nature, they felt more compelled to lean toward, you know what I'm saying, more of the moral side, because they felt like it was an issue with having that particular, having that particular, well, I lost my train of thought, having the alcohol and the sale and the production of it moving freely without some type of restriction. So they passed the prohibition. Now, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution started the prohibition. And then there were ethnic groups that began to start to see an opportunity. Okay, so I'm coming up to the present. I want y'all to follow me, because I know it's sounding kind of, you know, I might be sounding kind of wild right at the moment. But as they stopped the sale of liquor, in comes other ethnicities. Okay, and I mentioned this in one of my objectives.
other ethnicities started to be able to see an opportunity, right? Criminal activity started to take place as a result of this. Now, black folks ain't in the mix too much per se during, you know what I'm saying, a lot of these laws being passed because we've been neutralized. You know, we came off the boat being neutralized. You know, other ethnicities, the other immigrants, they didn't really, they had their issues, they had their particular laws, but it wasn't to the extent that it was with us. The way that they put us into a box and kept us, locked down and neutralized, right? So I'm looking for my last little bit of notes. Okay, so it says the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution started the Prohibition years. What ethnic groups were making money during this era? You had the Jews came in, the Irish came in, the Italians came in, the Poles kind of had a little bit of play going on, and then you had the rise of all these mafia and these gangsters, Al Capone, Lucky Luciano. Man, it's a whole list of guys. You had the Irish mob bosses. Let me read off some of them. You had some Irish gangs, 40 Thieves, the Bowery Boys, the Dead Rabbits, the Daybreak Boys, the Hooyahs, 5 Points Gang. All these particular gangs started to emerge during the Prohibition years and a little bit before, because they was coming off the boat from over across the water, Sicily and Italy and places out of Europe and so on and so forth, looking for an opportunity to be able to maximize on their ability to get that so-called piece of the American dream. One of the things that many of you probably have heard, you remember, or your grandparents might have said something about it, was moonshine. A lot of folks used to run the moonshine during that time. That was a big money maker for a lot of people during that era. You know what I'm saying? When they were saying you couldn't get liquor, because they stopped it during the Prohibition, right? So these gangsters started to rise, and they started to make a lot of money as a result of the fact that they were able to distribute and get liquor to people that wanted it throughout the years, using the train system and using boats and using people in the communities and distilleries, and some folks even paid off the police and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? To be able to make a lot of money. And somewhere I was reading, it said Al Capone, he was making $60 million a year selling bootleg alcohol, moonshine, and bathtub gin. So, imagine during that time making $60 million a year. That's a lot of money. They say his net worth today will be like $1.5 billion. You see what I'm saying? So that particular era started to open up opportunities for other ethnicities, other immigrants, but black folks really wasn't getting too much of a leg up because we was already put in a box anyway. We couldn't play too much. Now, we had our own little situation that kind of came about a little bit, but not much. We used to run the numbers. I don't know if you remember. You see a lot of these black exploitation movies. We was doing the lottery and running the numbers. Now, let me read off as we move forward. Let me read off some of the information that I came across as I was doing some research. It says most Sicilians landed in New Orleans, and they were being harassed by the Irish. Now, if you ain't never studied Irish history, the Irish were really one of the most notorious group of immigrants that first touched down in America, okay? And they stayed in some of the worst conditions possible. It was so bad that even if we lived amongst them, we would move out because they brought a lot of disease. They brought a lot of ill wills to the community, and they like to fight and do a lot of other stuff. That's where Notre Dame gets his name from. Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. That's not just a name they came up with. That's because them Irish were that serious about doing the things that they needed to do get to get wherever they wanted to go. So it says most Sicilians landed in New Orleans, and they were being harassed by the Irish. The criminals from Sicily offered protection, and okay, where am I? Hold on, just a minute. I'm gonna make sure I'm in the okay. They were being harassed by the Irish. Most of these Irish gangs also had corrupt police and others who wished to terrorize and exploit them. As time went on, Italians started to exploit their own people. Over time, the Italian mob was built up and able to rival Irish and Jewish gangs in New York for a piece of the territory. So as these folks getting off the bus, as they get off the boat, they're already figuring out what territory, where we're going to be, how we're going to rise to power. Okay? And that's why today you notice that you have, Jews is doing decent. Irish is, they do decent. The Italians is doing decent. You look at the Cubans, Cubans run Miami. They doing decent. A lot of these ethnicities came in with the I'm going to take mine, FU mentality, and they took what they needed to take. And they also paid off folks, beat up folks, killed folks along the way. During the late 19th or 20th century, waves of Italians, mostly farmers, craftsmen, and unskilled laborers, flocked to America for better economic opportunity. In New York City alone, the number of Italians soared from 20 to 250,000 between 1880 and 1890. And by 1990, that number jumped to 500,000 first-generation Italian Americans. After 1933, Prohibition, the mafia moved beyond bootlegging into a range of underworld activities. Now, you talk about somebody like Donald Trump. Donald Trump wouldn't be the man he is today if he didn't go through the mob. The mob, he had to do business. It was a documentary I was looking at. He had to, in order for him to get them buildings built, he had to go through the mafia to do it because they run New York. And they started in the underworld, but then they took their situation and started legalizing some of the operations. Some of them was illegal, but some of them they turned legal so that they could control, New York City and the finances that came along with it. Okay, so here are some of the underworld activities that the mobsters had: illegal gambling, loan sharking, prostitution rings, labor unions, legitimate businesses, construction, garbage collection, trucking, restaurants, nightclubs, and the garment industry. Okay, so they had their hand in everything needed in order for them to be able to make sure that they stayed economically sound. Where's black folks in all of this? Where we at? How we surviving? We living hand to mouth still. We still going out begging for jobs. We still looking for civil rights, voting rights, and any other right that they can give us because, we never got our 40 acres in the mule. We never got the opportunity to be able to rise to a point to where we could be self-sufficient. Now, it says in the 19th century, the Italians, they owed most of their success to the Irish gangs who came before them. In the 19th century, the Irish gangs established a network of criminal power that was entwined with political influence. In New York, street-level gangs such as the Roach Guards, the Carrerians, have started out protecting Irish immigrants from anti-Irish violence. However, they soon moved toward the control of prostitution, extortion, armed robbery, and the control of city docks. In the 19th century, Democratic Party used Irish gangs to ensure neighborhoods voted a certain way. This was a corrupt system. 2 million Italian immigrants left from the regions of Naples, Calabrese, and Sicily between 1880 and 1990. They found themselves, along with Jews, at the bottom of the food chain, and the corrupt political system was controlled by Irish gangs. So coming into America, these other ethnic immigrant groups, they had their issues just like we did, but they came in at the bottom, and they came in with the intent to take over, and they didn't have as many of the laws, the slave codes, the black codes, and all the other stuff that we had that kept them at the bottom. And, when you look at them, they look like white folk. I mean, we just got to call a spade a spade. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times you can't tell a Jew from an Irish, except you look real hard, maybe the hair color. You feel me? You can't tell some German, you know what I'm saying, from an Italian unless you look hard. Maybe, you know what I'm saying, maybe it's the nose. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's the facial feature or the eyes. But these folks still had a real opportunity to rise. Now, I had read in a book by the Minister Farrakhan, the relationship between blacks and Jews, where he talks about how when they came out of the emancipation and they went into the sharecropping, a lot of Jews, because they had a will to work and a will to, create their own situation, they would sell, blankets, shoes, might be toothpaste, might be clothes, pants, gloves to the slaves. They started building. They coming in, they building. You know what I'm saying? And as they built and went all over the country, then they started to set up little bitty little mom and pop stores. Then little mom and pop stores started to turn out to be stuff like Macy's, Neiman Marcus. You feel me? All your big name department stores, the generational, coming from generations with their ancestors out here peddling. You know what I'm saying? While we on there trying to get our money, you know what I'm saying, for sharing in the cropping on somebody's land, and then we getting gypped, and the dude don't want to pay us, and then he telling us we in debt, and then he's saying, well, you still owe me, so I got to keep coming back to your land to work. I got to keep coming back to because I owe you money. You didn't lend me the tools. And not only are you not paying me for farming the land, but then you keeping me in debt too. See what I'm saying? So as these 19th century immigrants touch down, boom, they starting gangs. The gangs start from there, turning into the mob. Now the Irish, they rolled off into like the police departments, the fire departments. They started to create their own industry. They doing their thing the way they want to do it. The Jews started to create their own industry. They going into the entertainment. They doing the movies. They doing the music. They taking over. You feel me? And we don't have nothing to go on. So as these mob bosses started to go in North Harlem, Lucky Luciano, during the 18th century, you got Al Capone running Chicago. You get a couple of blacks that decided they going to try to get in on the game. You know how we do. If he can do it, I can do it better. You know what I'm saying? And then, we start to be able to make try to make some strides. So during that time, let me make sure I got myself situated. Okay. Black mob bosses started to arise. Ellsworth Johnson, better known as Bumpy Johnson, during the 1930s. What's this guy name here? Mickey the Cobra, Henry Caldwell, Jeff Riddle, Frank Nitti. Y'all remember John Lucas? All these guys started to, they started to run their situation down in Harlem, parts of New York, over in Chi-Town. They might have had some stuff going on in Detroit, Philly. But what was funny as I was doing my research was, even though some of these guys was making some money, they still had to do business with folks like Lucky Luciano and things of that nature. So now let me just kick off a couple of these guys. Now you've seen Denzel Washington. He played, I think he played John Lucas, the big time drug lord, kingpin. And, he had amassed a lot of wealth. You take coming up to the 80s, you take somebody like Rick Ross. Rick Ross, he had amassed a lot of wealth, but most of that was, made possible through the CIA, according to his own words. You take somebody like Bumpy Johnson. Johnson ran the rackets in Harlem for the Genovese crime family. Now understand, these dudes, they look like they indie. They look independent, but again, they still got to lean on that guy who running the whole city, who running the whole country, who running the whole state. Bumpy Johnson ran the rackets in Harlem for the Genovese crime family in the 20th century. He ran the lottery after Prohibition. Okay, see, once Prohibition started to open up a lot of opportunities for folks in the criminal industry, because they cut a lot of stuff off that people like to do: drink, gamble, And any good entrepreneur, he gonna see an opportunity. You know what I'm saying? Folks like Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, and all your other crime bosses, you know, said I can make a ton of money. Mickey the Cobra, founder of the Cobra Street Gang on the west side of Chicago. These are all black mob bosses I'm reading off. Rose to be in the Windy City Black Underworld liaison. Okay, well, let me read that again. Cogwell rose to be the Windy City's Black Underworld liaison to the Italian Mafia in Chicagoland area called the Outfits. Okay, he had to do business with the Italians. The Italians, Jews, they still got control of everything. Jeff Riddle, Black John Gotti, what they called him in the 1890s. And then you had, Parcell Edwards. He was associated with the Luis family. Okay, so all of this is going on as, you know, black folks are still trying to make their strides. They're still trying to make improvements. They're still trying to come up. They're looking for illegal activity. And then you got these black crime bosses, but none of them were independent and economically sound enough to stand on their own. A couple of folks, I think, like Lucas and other folks, kind of tried to cut out the middleman, and they went straight down, you know, to the islands in Mexico, to the area in Mexico, and got, you know, certain you know, drugs that they needed without having to go through the Italians. Now, Black Mafia, American organized crime, was between the period of 1890 and 1960. According to the research, it says the historical role of Africans in organized crime in the United States has been greatly ignored by the academic community. Black Americans played a minor role in the ethnic, gambling, and vice industries that existed in many American cities. Okay, again, black gangsters, black crime bosses, Bumpy Johnson, Nicky Barnes, John Lucas. There was in effect no mafia syndicate structure among minority groups. They did not evolve around a common code of behavior or rules governing relationships between and among various groups. There were no examples of network influencing in elections, delivering a vote, funding political candidates, or having any affiliation with the unions. The Italians and the Jews, they had a system and an organization that kept them in power. We was doing it the way we doing it. We doing it the same way today. We doing it from the hip. You know, dude making a lot of money, but he ain't got no organization. He ain't got no team. He ain't got no way to leave his money. And you seen it from the movies that they showed with some of these guys in their autobiographies. They go to jail, their money gone. They ain't able to leave that money to them kids. They ain't able to leave the money to the wife. So again, what happened? We was neutralized economically. A lot of us was getting, you know, during that time in between 1880 and 1960, getting dope, getting heroin, you know, from the Italians and the Jews. You know what I'm saying? We had to go to them. Why? Because they cornered the market. They ran everything. You know, they made sure that, you know, it wasn't going to be an issue with black folks coming up, because they didn't want to see you come up no way. They give you a little play. They throw you a couple of seeds. As long as you're working on their behalf and they benefit, you know, that is what allowed, you know, many of these folks to stay in power. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm coming up on, you know, the end of the information that I really wanted to present. If you got any comments or questions, please feel free. I'm going to open it up, and then what I'll probably do is go ahead and close it on out, because it's pushing about 9 o'clock. I try not to go too far beyond that. But again, I know this topic ain't like real sexy. You know what I'm saying? This is for the serious entrepreneur. This is for the serious person that's trying to make moves out here, and you ain't understanding the game that's being played. Because if you look in my neighborhood, everybody that look like somebody else is winning. I got the Asians over here with the liquor store. You feel me? I got the Koreans with the nail shop, and this is all on my block. I got McDonald's, KFC, Burger King. I got the Pakistani, you know what I'm saying, over here with the check cash in place. And they, you know, and his daddy nasty. You know, he try to smile and pretend like he like you, but he really don't. His son the one that got the hip hop. So we kind of bridge between him and his son to kind of make it smooth over. Then we got the Arabs, you know, running the gas station. You know what I'm saying? And we got Chase Bank, Bank of America. All this is on my block. You know what I'm saying? Everybody pulling money out the community. Ain't nobody black winning. You feel me? Because you don't understand the history. You don't understand what's really going on. And then as you go out here and you try to play this global game of capitalism, and you see folks like Dwayne and Tisha Martin filing $15 million for bankruptcy, I'm like, man, how? Ain't no reason for you to be filing. You got too much money. You feel me? But you don't understand the game called capitalism. You know, you don't understand the history of it. So that's why, you know what I'm saying, I wanted to present it, but I had already been thinking about doing it anyway. So if anybody got a comment, please feel free. Comment, leave a comment, and, you know, if not, then I'm going to close it out, say my last little remarks, and then I'll probably jump on this last little bit, bring it up to the 80s and up to the current next week, and then kind of sit back and see, you know, where I'm going to go from there. Anybody got a comment or a question? Going once, going twice. I know there's a couple people chiming in and out, so I appreciate y'all. Again, I'm Cool Water. You can find me at Cool Water 101 Facebook, Cool Water 101 Twitter, LinkedIn, Cool Water 101, Google Plus, Mr. Alexander, Pinterest. If you want to email me about some comments or a question, you can go to 7 days. I'll spell out the number 9 at Gmail, and I'll get right back to you. And like I said, anybody that called in, I definitely want to appreciate your time because like I said, the topic ain't sexy, but for me it's so needed because I'm seeing the kids in the school, they lost. I'm seeing black folks out here, man, getting raped and robbed at their jobs, you know, and they just don't understand the game. You know, you don't understand the game. I see people out here trying to call themselves starting businesses, and, yeah, you may go out here and make a couple of dollars, but at some point, if you really own it, you're going to run up on these other ethnicities, and if you don't understand the game that's being played against you and the war that's being waged against you, and that you're the fourth, now what they call a permanent underclass, you're going to wonder how you end up in bankruptcy and how they was able to take your stuff from you. So I'm out. Peace and stay blessed. Thank you again for chiming in, and I'll look to speak with y'all next week. Holla.